First off, I hate doing the waiver wire. It's a lot of work.
Don't be too proud to go ahead and get them back.
The yak and come back. Gain an edge in your fantasy baseball league by using these tips on the waiver wire and with your fab budget. I'm Alan Seslowsky here with RotoWire managing editor Chris Liss, here with RotoWire co-founder Jeff Erickson. Drafting is one of the most fun parts of fantasy baseball. Leagues are won on the waiver wire. What's your overall strategy for waiver wire pickups?
First off, I hate doing the waiver wire. It's a lot of work, but you got to do it. You got to dig through it. I think you got to be aggressive on the waiver wire.
I need to work on my impulse control.
I think it is better to overbid by a lot and get the guy you want than to be outbid by $2.
Every granular dollar matters.
You start to overpay early.
When you spend $5 to $7 on closer speculations, those run out pretty quickly. And you don't have enough money for August and September.
And you don't have that much money, then you will budget and go for sort of a week ahead sleepers. There's two ways to do it. One is to be aggressive and get the obvious guy that people want and just pay more. And the other way is to kind of look ahead when the closer hasn't yet got the job. When a guy who looks like could be faltering as the closer, and then you see who his backup is, and if he's a good player and he's doing well, get that guy before the actual closer loses his job, and you'll get him a lot cheaper. When you have more money, I think be aggressive as you start to dwindle down. Be a little judicious and look ahead.
What's one of the most common mistakes even experienced high-stakes players make on the waiver wire?
You got to be willing to drop players. I think people aren't willing to drop the players that are sort of sketchy on their own teams. There's something called the endowment effect. Once they have a player, they overvalue that player only because they have him. If that player were on the waiver wire, they'd be like, he's not good. There's 3 guys better than him on waivers. But because he's on your team, you think, what could go right for him? He's going to break out the second I drop him. And I think it was Genstad or both Pianowski and Genstad, they say this, and I agree with this. You should have a couple regrets. You should make a couple mistakes dropping a player that turns out to be good. Because if you never make a mistake like that, that means you're being too passive. You're not making enough moves.
I think it is on the secondary bids, not really getting granular enough on the bid level there. I mean, say if you do like 6 guys for one spot, bids 2 through 5, you might not take as much time. You might not take as much time on the amounts.
There's always fantasy baseball managers who drop slumping stars for the hot bat or hot pitcher. How do you avoid that temptation?
I mean, you got to be willing to drop players.
You're going to make a mistake.
And if it's like a 10th rounder you thought was going to be good and he's slumping, that's one of the guys you might just cut bait on if he's losing a little time or whatever.
You're going to have guys that are going to do better after you drop them. Some guys that you pick up aren't going to do well. But I think the more churn you do, the more transactions you make, typically the better off you are, because you at least if you're an experienced player, you know the player pool and you're good at evaluating players, make more calls.
But a guy that you invested a lot in and he's not hurt, you got to just always ask yourself, what's the ceiling of this guy if he rights the ship? And if that ceiling is incredibly high, you have to have a very good reason to cut him. Otherwise, you stick it out and you're kind of stuck with him. One other thing I want to say about waiver wire that I don't think people always realize is that if you go all in and get a good player in mid-April, you've got that guy for 5.5 months. But if you save your money and you're really judicious in the trade deadlines when closers change jobs and there's a new closer, and you go all in because you're the one who saved money, you get 2 months of that guy. So just realize that the earlier you get your money in, if the player sticks, and he may not not be good enough, you may end up cutting him anyway, he's potentially a 5.5 month player. Whereas the longer you wait, the less time the players have to put up stats for you.
What is a signal to you when to go all in on a player?
Pedigree plus performance and role.
It's got to be a team need usually, unless it's just such a great prospect that's surprisingly coming up. Again, it's just sort of like, what's his ceiling? What could happen? What could go right? Who could this guy be? What's his opportunity? Just like you evaluate a player at a draft or for a trade. It's just, if this guy is a high value player, you got to put some budget on him.
What do you think is a tactic that is underrated when talking about the waiver wire in your fab budget?
Take a look at who people cut.
Trying to get that closer 2 or 3 weeks in advance.
So you may catch a guy that you might have, when you're doing your research, just miss.
It's just looking at like the bullpens, looking at see who's pitching well, who's being used in the 8th inning, who's warming up when a closer is struggling.
Try RotoWire free for 10 days by going to rotowire.com/YouTube or simply click on the link in this video description below.